how did my drinking get so out of control that I ended up having this rock bottom moment? Hi everyone, welcome to All of My Stories. I'm Nina Davalori. I'm a former Miss America filmmaker and activist, and I love sharing all of my big sis advice here on my channel. There are lots of things for everyone to get into, but today's video is about my Pretty Naked series. I really wanted to write the show to share my sobriety journey and parts of my addiction journey. So for those of you who don't know, I did a one-person show called Pretty Naked, and that was back in the May of this year, so still fairly recent. And I did that in New York City. I performed it, I wrote, directed, produced, all of it, and I'm just so proud of that show. If you have not seen Pretty Addicted, each chapter is a different chapter. There's 7 parts, and I just released part 6, which is Pretty Addicted. And that really shares kind of my rock bottom moment. So if you haven't seen it yet, please go watch that video first, because it will give you a lot of context into why I'm doing this video. Because in that video, I say, how did I get here? And that's in reference to my rock bottom moment. And what I realized just through this journey is that I needed to ask, how did this begin? It wasn't even like, how did I get here? Like, how did this begin? How did my drinking get so out of control that I ended up having this rock bottom moment? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I wanted to share a little more in depth of sort of the patterns that I discovered for myself, why I was drinking, and I hope that this helps you if you are sober curious, or if you're struggling with alcohol, or if you think you have a problem, you're not sure, or if you just want some story time. I'm going to tell you all of my tea that I'm a little nervous about, but I know that context always helps, and I know that this would have really helped me in the beginning of my sober journey. So let's get into it. When did I start drinking? I started drinking in high school. I was honestly just curious. That was like the first entry point into it. I was really curious about what alcohol was, what it did to you. And so I never felt really a sense of pressure from everyone else doing it. I'm so sorry, Mom. Mama D has no idea. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I put you through so much. Anyways, so yeah, it's probably my junior year of high school. It started as like a curious thing, went into, it was the cool thing to do, and, my friends were doing it. I also realized probably towards the end of my senior year and going into college, it was really a way to make friends. And I would visit my sister at University of Michigan, and we would drink, and that was the way you just went out and made friends. And so being someone who's really shy, I was very shy, very nervous, really didn't like approaching people, talking to people. I was not that person who could walk into a room and introduce myself and be like, hey, I'm here, which I know sounds so counterintuitive, especially with the whole Miss America thing. But Miss America almost felt like a little bit of an alter ego in some ways. I like to call her Pageant Nina. I learned how to walk into a room, not know a single person, and be able to talk to someone. And I think that's what pageants genuinely taught me. And I started competing when I was a junior in high school. And so learning that muscle, which is certainly a muscle, was something that I had to do. But it's not intuitive to me. It's not natural to me. So if you're struggling with feeling like you can't walk into a room, know that it's possible, and it is just a muscle and practice. But originally, I thought, oh, alcohol is a way where I don't have to build that muscle genuinely. It kind of gives you that liquid courage, right? Where you take your first couple sips, you're feeling great, and then you start getting a little more courage to introduce yourself, to say hi. You can say stupid things and not feel, I guess, guilty about it, or, blame it on the alcohol. That's kind of how it turned into more of the social aspect of it for me, was that it also just allowed me, I felt like it helped me to make friends. And in college, I was in a sorority. I went to University of Michigan, which is a big football school. I was in the Indian American Student Association. So all of these activities did involve heavy drinking during my time there, but it was what everyone did. It didn't feel like I had necessarily had a problem. at the time. And then it was also, again, another way to make friends. Like, hey, do you want to take a shot? And, it kind of breaks the ice. It's just like an easy entry point to having a conversation, especially when you're in college and you're feeling younger. And that was a different time maybe than people are in now, but that's how I felt during the time. When did I really feel like this was a problem? After college, I moved back home with my parents. I was studying for the MCAT. I was getting ready for Miss New York and competing in pageants literally for 2 years. It took me 2 years to win Miss New York. And I wasn't really drinking because I was competing for swimsuit and you could not drink alcohol and lose weight. Also, all of this is in my one-person show. So please go back and watch all of these little tidbits because it's helpful context. So anyway, so I moved back home. There really wasn't any opportunity for me to like go out with friends and drink. So it wasn't really an issue then. But after I had won Miss America and I was traveling and touring and, just experiencing such a high and also low because it's such a lonely job when you are traveling across the country by yourself and, living out of suitcases in hotel rooms. And I feel like there were times where I needed that personality cocktail, or I felt like, it was kind of a similar feeling of like, hey, do you want to take a shot and make friends? It was, hey, like I'll be fun, happy Nina if I just have a drink before I go to this event or dinner. And that's kind of where I feel like it started. And I was like, and I justified it by like, I'm going to be so much more myself if I just have this drink. And honestly, when you walk into a room and you are judged by every single person looking at you, I sometimes felt like, I just needed that one drink to like get me through that pressure or get me through that judgment in some ways. And so that's when I feel like maybe it transferred from let's make friends to, I just need to be a little happier. I just need to be a little more social and likable. And that kind of came into play during that year and after that year as well. I would say moving to New York, boozy brunch is definitely a thing. I moved to New York in 2015 and boozy brunch was like totally justified. You could always count on someone to like do bottomless mimosas. Previously, I would associate drinking with just like a nighttime thing. It was like a going out, you go to the club, bars, whatever, restaurants, but I never associated it with like daytime. And then when you come to like an area or a bigger city like New York or anywhere, and you're doing the boozy brunches, which became more often, it was kind of like, I'm drinking not only at night, but then like it turned into like the next morning and you don't feel good. I didn't feel good and I was still constantly like worried about my weight gain and everything. So I wasn't drinking so excessively, primarily because I was so concerned with how I looked and my body and my weight. And alcohol is empty calories. It's the number one thing like you probably start cutting out if you are trying to lose weight. And obviously you make terrible decisions when you drink alcohol. It would end in like 2 a.m. pizza or Seamless or whatever, like just ordering all this food, eating all this junk. And so that's what really kept me from kind of going off of the edge, I would say, maybe. I would say 2019 was really the hardest time I had with it. And that was because I was struggling with depression and anxiety. I was going through a lot of life changes. I had turned 30. I was having like a little bit of an identity, no, not even a little bit, definitely having an identity crisis of what I wanted to do, what I wanted, the next phase of my life to look like. I felt like no one understood what I was going through because no one had ever been in the position I had been in. And so I felt incredibly alone, even talking to my mentors, talking to my family, like I just felt like no one gets this, like no one understands. And I was in therapy, but at that point, something had happened. I'd gone out and something had happened that night. And I woke up feeling so embarrassed, so ashamed. And I think we've all had those moments, like to some level, to some degree, it's a varying spectrum. But I just remember hating feeling that way because I rarely like let myself necessarily feel that way. Like whenever I drank, I was always only with like family. I wasn't just like randomly going out. I was like very, very careful about the people that I drank with just because honestly, I was paranoid about like people saying stuff or like me not like maintaining this perfect image, even though what I was doing was normal at the time. Something happened where I thought, do I have a problem? That was like the first time I actually thought that. At that point, I had walked into my first AA meeting in Manhattan. Also, the sober community really is one of the most beautiful communities possible. And there was a person who came up to me during this meeting, and I just remember thinking, like, yes, I could understand what people were saying in this meeting, but I also was like, I am nowhere near that. Like, I'm so not close to that level, and I just don't see how I can just completely cut alcohol out of my life. There was this person who approached me after, and she said, when you're ready to make your sobriety the most important thing, like, that's when you'll know. And it's almost like she kind of knew that I wasn't quite ready to make the decision to fully get sober. I just wasn't in that place. And I held on to that because it was impactful. I don't know why, but it just stood out to me. And so I continued drinking in 2019. I stopped drinking in January of 2020. I would do like moments and months of like no alcohol if I was doing Whole30 or doing like Sober January. And so January of 2020, I was doing Sober January, and this was also the time we were filming Complexion, and I wanted to be sober during that process. That was so important to me, and I had made a little bit of these connections of, wow, like every time I've felt so good in life and felt like I'm on the right path and have purpose and driving towards that purpose is when I don't drink, period. That was kind of also in the back of my mind. And of course, like filming Complexion was such a life-changing, sobering experience in another way that alcohol like isn't even a thought on your mind. And then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, that's when everything started to spiral out of control. That was truly the moment that I feel like it was the beginning of the end. And we all remember everyone was doing like the Zoom happy hours, and you know, it was easy to just like be drinking because that's what people were doing at the time. And there was nothing else to do. So we were all kind of like participating in these activities. And the first book I read during quarantine was Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And that book, I am telling you, changed my life. That book truly changed my life. It allowed me to think differently about sobriety. It allowed me to think differently about what my life could look like if I like actually stopped drinking. And I remember there was a moment where I was like, if I can accomplish all of these things while I'm drinking and having these bursts of like depression and hangovers, like what can I accomplish when I'm not drinking, like, and actually have a clear head 24/7? Like, what would that even be like? I don't know. And so I decided that I was going to do like a Whole30 sober reset. And this is like me recognizing I had a problem. Like it was definitely like, I cannot control my drinking. I would wake up in the morning and have a drink, and then it would continue into the afternoon and evening. And it was clear that I had a problem. And I had said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to do this for 30 days because I need to. And we'll see if I can do it for 30 days. And if I do it for 30 days, then maybe we'll see if I can like, you know, introduce it again. Like, how am I going to do on it? And I started it right in the end of April, early May. It was clear to me that I had a problem, but I was having a very hard time facing it. And yes, I had made this decision for like 30 days, and I had friends who were doing like Whole30 with me, so we were all kind of in this together for like that accountability. But I knew personally inside of me that this was a problem. And that's when I started going to virtual AA meetings because everything was virtual. And it was honestly a lot easier in terms of an entry point. There was less barrier to entry to getting yourself to a meeting because I was like, I have no excuse to not go to this meeting because it is a virtual link and everyone is doing this. And when I joined, my life started changing because I was in a place where I, one, knew it was a problem. I recognized that I had a problem with alcohol. I might not have been admitting that to anyone else but myself, but that's the only thing that mattered. And I knew I needed help and guidance in actually staying sober. And once I had that shift, I saw myself in every single person who was in that virtual room or on that Zoom call or in meetings. And like you start resonating and really empathizing and feeling and thinking like, oh, that's me. Like I've had that experience. And it just continued to get stronger. In addition to those meetings, I have always been a Brene Brown follower, probably since like 2019 is when I like got introduced to her work. And I was introduced to it through like Oprah's Super Soul podcast. And so I'm going to be honest with you. I never grew up watching Oprah. I knew, of course, who she was. I knew her impact, but I was too young to watch the Oprah show. So I never fully understood the impact that she was creating with the Oprah show until I started listening to Super Soul, and then she started releasing like podcasts of the actual Oprah show episodes. So I got super just like so into the Oprah world, and like I was like, oh, it was my Oprah era. I was like, I get it. I understand why. Like Oprah changed my life. And so did Brene Brown, so did Glennon Doyle, and all of these people. Brene Brown also talks about her sobriety, and Glennon talks about hers. And I remember thinking, wow, these are like two women that I really respect and are walking the talk, and I trust their advice because they're doing it. And I've also been able to see what has happened to them in their lives. And so I got like way more into like, I guess, self-help, even though I don't like saying that. Maybe, I guess you could call it self-help. So yeah, so I was just on this like whole new journey of like experiencing life and thinking about life and myself and so many different ways. And then it all came crumbling down because July 4th happened, and I had reached my goal of 30 days. I'd done maybe 60 days at this point. I went through the end of June, and I was like, you know what? I feel like I can handle this. I feel like I can handle my alcohol. I think I can handle like a weekend of drinking and then go back to having like a normal balance with it and not like binge drinking. And then July 4th weekend, I went out to the Hamptons to visit my sister and her husband, and they were hosting us that weekend. And I went, and I don't remember what happened because I was drinking, but I just woke up the next day feeling really embarrassed and really ashamed. And no one told me what had happened. No one really had the conversation of like, hey, like you had a little too much. And like we really didn't have a lot of those conversations. And it's hard to have those conversations. I sort of also like chalked it up as like, oh my gosh, like I haven't been drinking in like 3 months. So like I've had way too much tonight, but I just had that same feeling of shame and regret. And I hated that feeling. And so I was like, okay, clearly I still have problems with this. I don't want to feel this way. I've been feeling amazing for these 3 months, and I ruined it in one weekend. But it was still really hard because I had one toe in recovery and one toe out, and you cannot do recovery that way. You cannot get sober that way. I think for me, it did not work. And so I moved back to New York that August of 2020, and I started seeing a new therapist twice a week, specifically for alcohol and addiction, because it was so clear to me that I needed more help than I was getting in this one specific arena and this one specific focus. And I was having a hard time just even grappling and getting to the decision of saying, I need to be 100% sober. That was where I could not get to on my own. And I was slipping back into old habits, and especially when things were opening up and everyone was like kind of moving back to the city, everything was outdoors, and like there was like stuff in the air where people were just like finally ready to get out. I was dating. I just started dating. I gotten on the apps, and what activities do you do if like you don't drink on a first date, right? Which I'm going to tell you lots of them. That's for another video. But yeah, like there was just like so much kind of happening in the air, and especially New York, everything is so oriented around drinking. And so I moved back. I was drinking. I was seeing this therapist twice a week. We had started to like put up systems of, okay, can I handle only drinking during the weekends? Can I set a rule for myself and say, I'm not going to have more than 3 drinks this night, or I'm not going to have more than 5 drinks in a week. One of the biggest things I also started thinking about that she had said to me is, your relationship with alcohol is yours alone. It is singular. It does not have to do with everyone else's drinking. It is your relationship with it and what you decide or not decide to do with that. That was really helpful to hear, because the biggest barrier to getting sober, I think, is thinking about, well, everyone else is going to be doing it around me. Like, how am I going to live in this world? Which will come. That will come later. So I had moments of trying to get my alcohol under control, which I couldn't, but I was trying to. I was making the effort, but I just fully wasn't ready to be sober yet. When I came back to the city, I was living with my sister and her husband and his brother at the time. All four of us are really close, which I'm really lucky and fortunate, but we were all living together. And during the fall of 2020, going into like January, I feel like my sister started noticing how much I was drinking and was worried about it. And she had kind of like maybe had one conversation with me, but of course I was like so defensive and not wanting to hear it and being like, I'm fine. I was just being like the younger sister, I guess. But inwardly I knew I just wasn't ready to hear it or talk about it. And I moved into my first big girl West Village apartment in January of 2021. I was so excited. It was the first time I was living alone by myself. Felt like I was really ready for that move. And when I had moved, we had tried to say, okay, I'm not going to bring alcohol into my new apartment. I'll only drink when I'm going out. And you will come to find out that that rule was clearly broken. And if you have not watched Pretty Addicted, please watch it because that is relevant to this story. And that shares like the rock bottom moment. But in February of 2021, so a month after I'd moved out with my sister, moved into my own place, I had a huge fight with my sister, like beyond any fight we'd ever had. Like the biggest fight that we'd ever had. It was terrible. It was bad. I said some things that I can never take back. And it was bad. And I remember just waking up after that fight and thinking, this is how it starts. And I know this because addiction runs in my family and I've seen it up close and personal with other family members. And I remember thinking like the first people that you really start pushing away once alcohol or any substance sort of takes over your life is your family, because they will tolerate the most from you. They won't like it and it's terrible and it's just a horrible thing to feel like you're putting them through, but I think it's true. Like your family is going to at least have the most empathy and for you and will probably deal with more of your bullshit than they should. While this is going on and I'm having all these issues, complexion was taking off, and outwardly, my public persona, everything seemed fine. Everything actually seemed great, like looking at it from an Instagram or social media lens or even just like career lens, everything was going really well. And yet I was having this like secret life that I was living inside my little apartment. It started way before that. There wasn't a rock bottom moment for me in the sense of I had, like a DUI or something publicly happened. It was more of the wake up call of I had this terrible fight with my sister, who's one of my best friends. And if I continue to do this, I will continue to break that relationship and continue to hurt my family. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. I was like, it's going to start with my family and then it's going to trickle into friends and then it's going to go into like larger society. And I did not want to do that nor be that person. And I knew where the path ended. I knew where the road ended if I continued drinking because I had seen it in my family, and I knew where this was going if I decided to just continue to let alcohol run my life, which at this point it really was. And I was completely drunk and blackout when I said horrible things to my sister. And so that led me to really finally being able to say, I can't do this anymore. And it took a couple weeks. It definitely took a couple weeks to finally get there. Finally, on March 3rd, 2021, when I thought, how did I end up here? I remember I cried out for help, and I specifically cried out to my dad. And my dad had passed away in 2016, and I knew that I needed to get sober. I knew there was no other decision. There was no other path. It was so clear. It was so obvious. And I knew that I couldn't do it alone. And I knew I needed help. And I knew I needed like a greater power than me to be able to get me through this process, or at least get me into this process of sobriety. And, you know, like I said in the show, you're kind of grappling with grieving a part of who you are and thinking about, will people like me? What's my life going to be like? And you have all these swirling thoughts in your head. But ultimately, came down to, I cannot live life this way. I have no control over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. And that's like rule number one, I think, of AA. And when I cried out for help, I remember kind of feeling a weight lifting, like a sense of, almost everything's going to be okay, even though I didn't know how that was going to happen. I was like, is it going to be okay? Like, she is not in a good place. And, you know, I can see that vision in my head of where I was at. And she was so unhappy, so depressed, so insecure, so tortured, so lonely, like all of these things in terms of keeping up appearances. And it breaks my heart for that. But if I didn't have that moment, I wouldn't have been able to have the life that I have now. And making that decision, that moment was when I made the decision to get sober, to quit drinking. And once you make the decision, I learned this from Oprah. Oprah has said, once you make the decision, any decision about anything, that's when everything goes into motion. And it can be job, career, life, anything, right? But once you decide to do something or not do something, that is when everything around that decision will go into motion and the universe will have your back. And I really believe that, because if I hadn't decided, then I couldn't have stuck to it. If I hadn't decided, this is it, I'm not going to continue this journey and see where alcohol is going to lead me, because I know exactly where it's going to lead me. I'm fortunate that nothing bad outwardly has happened, that sadly it's only within my family members that are recognizing this. None of my friends, no one, not even my best friends would have even said anything. It was so obvious where the path was going, and I decided that I did not want to take that path. I was like, this road is done. I'm ending this journey on this road, and I'm at a fork, and I want to take this other road, and I need to see what that other road leads to. And that other road is filled with obstacles and challenges and, gosh, so many things that are so hard when you first start getting sober. But it's the best decision I have ever made in my life, truly. Is making the decision to get sober and continuing on that path. And I wanted to share this entire journey because I feel like a lot of us might come to this realization later. It doesn't matter when, but I really hope that this helps, you know, maybe make you not feel alone, or at least know that there's options. Everyone has their own time, their own journey, their own relationship with alcohol. Mine is just one story out of many. And if you are struggling with alcohol or any sort of substance abuse, know that recovery is possible. I didn't have the money, honestly, to like check myself into a rehab treatment center. This was something I had to do completely on my own. And that's actually the next video I'm going to share, because this one is getting very, very long. And I'm going to share my entire how I got sober journey, because that was a whole thing. And I feel like there were certain things that I did that were really helpful along the way, and just a couple resources, and obviously many learnings. So the next video I'm going to release is Pretty Sober, and that's going to kind of tie together the entire Pretty Naked show that I did, that I'm so proud of. I am very proud of my sober journey. I can honestly sit here and say that it's the most proud thing I've done in my life, and I've done a lot of things in my life, and going on that journey is something that really nothing is more important than that. And so I'm grateful to be able to be on the other side. I'm grateful to have a community to share it with. It feels really weird to say subscribe, like, and follow, but I hope that you do, because building this community and finally being able to share so much of the things that I've been through behind the scenes, honestly, feels really good because there's been one perception and one image of who Nina is and who I am and what I've been through. And there's so many more layers. And I want to get deeper on this channel and life in general. And I feel like once you get sober, you're over superficial conversations because you have to have stimulating conversations. Obviously, not just that, there's a bunch of other things to share, but I just wanted to wrap this chapter up and let you know that there's 2 more kind of in this little I guess mini series, or just topic specifically, because I feel like it's valuable and I hope it helps. And know that addiction can look like me. It can look like anyone around you, any person. You never know what someone is going through. You never truly really know what someone is going through. And so this has also helped me have a lot of grace. And every time I look at someone's happy TikTok or Instagram or whatever is on social media, I tell myself that you never really know what's going on behind the scenes, because I was that person posting the happy things and pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. So I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for taking the time. If you feel like this video will help someone, please share it. And I will see you next time.